Welcome to Amusement and Adventure. My name's Mark and I'm here today in a very sunny Blackpool Pleasure Beach to bring you the definitive guide to the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is a classic out and back wooden roller coaster, and it's amazing to think that it reaches its 99th anniversary this year. Later on in the video we'll take a front seat ride on Big Dipper, but first of all we're going to take a look behind the scenes and have a look at some of the early history of the Big Dipper. Big Dipper operates two separate trains. Each train is made up of 3 individual cars that can each seat up to 8 people, giving a total capacity of 24 people per train. The track is 3,300 feet long and the highest point of the ride, at the top of the lift hill, is 65 feet high. Like all roller coasters, the Big Dipper relies upon gravity. Once the train leaves the station, it is hauled up its 2 lift hills by a chain. Once it reaches the top of the main lift hill, it freewheels or coasts around the track layout until it returns back into the station, from where the whole cycle can be repeated time and time again with new passengers each time. Big Dipper reaches a top speed of 40 miles per hour. That's 64 kilometers per hour, and riders will experience a maximum G-force of 3.7 G. One complete ride takes approximately 2 minutes 30 seconds. The first of its generation to use new under-track and side friction wheels to allow a steeper and faster design. Opened in 1923, the Big Dipper is the second oldest wooden roller coaster still in operation in the UK today. A masterpiece of roller coaster design, celebrating its 99th anniversary. Older than all of the Disney theme parks and the Cyclone roller coaster in New York, Big Dipper truly has stood the test of time and is one of the best wooden roller coasters in the world. Constructed at a cost of £25,000 back in 1922, that's equivalent to around £1.5 million in today's money. The Big Dipper is built on the site of one of Blackpool's earliest amusement rides, the Switchback Railway. The Switchback Railway was a very basic coaster that was a common sight at many seaside resorts in the early 1900s.
The Big Dipper, which was built in my father's time, it was the last ride he put up. It cost a lot of money, you see, in those days. People said, "Oh, Mr. Bean, a shilling for a roller coaster? It only lasts about a couple of minutes, you know." And he said, yes, he said, it's expensive, I know, but then, you see, for that I shall give them a mahogany pay desk and a terrazzo entrance floor. Oh, it feels very exhilarating, very exhilarating. The point is, you should sit down, relax, let the car take you, go with the ride.
The original Big Dipper was a very different ride to the one operating today. It had a much shorter L-shaped layout which turned greater than 90 degrees left after the second drop, and then followed what was at the time the boundary of the park, roughly along the line where the Big One's lift hill stands today. Interestingly, the layout included a double dip, something that would later become the trademark element of the Grand National. The ride operated from 1923 until 1935 and reopened in 1936, having been modified and extended by Charles Page. Back in the day, all of the rides at Blackpool Pleasure Beach had their own ticket kiosks and were pay per ride, but with the introduction of a park entry charge in place of tickets, Big Dipper's ticket kiosk is now only a distant memory. For a period of time in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Big Dipper's trains operated with 4 cars. These longer trains had a very different ride characteristic. The transfer track in the station is only designed to take trains of 3 cars in length, so when 4-car trains were used, the first car had to be detached from the train to allow it to be added or removed from the main track. Today the ride once again operates with 3-car trains. The Big Dipper was originally designed by John A. Miller and built by William H. Strickler and the Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters Inc. It was in complete contrast to previous roller coasters due to the greater speeds and steeper crests, giving passengers airtime of negative G-forces which would have been unsafe using the previous side friction system. Today the ride is considered of such historical importance it is designated as a Grade 2 listed building. The ride's iconic station building has had many different looks and has been dramatically updated and transformed over the past 99 years. The original station had a wine glass shaped structure which Joseph Emberton, a leading modernist architect who had influenced lots of the architecture within the Pleasure Beach, changed to a cone-shaped lighthouse in 1936. The lighthouse and its enclosed tower were replaced in 1953 with inclined latticework legs designed by renowned engineer Felix Samueli. Sitting proudly at the top of the tower for all to see is Big Dipper's iconic sign and its unmistakable droplet, but more about that a little later. There's always a great sense of excitement in the station for Big Dipper, and people come from all over the world to ride it. Some people even celebrate their wedding day on Big Dipper. The name Big Dipper has become a generic name for roller coasters the world over, but it is in fact a very specific name given to rides built by Miller and his company around the time he worked with Blackpool Pleasure Beach, presumably referring to the fact that his upstop wheel system allowed these rides to have much bigger drops than anything that had gone before, rather than being called after the constellation of stars known as the Big Dipper in the US and the Plough in the UK. Big Dipper has a very unique and ingenious haul-up mechanism which makes use of a single inline chain which is used twice on 2 separate lift hill sections. The chain mechanism is driven by a very large and powerful 600 volt electric motor which is housed in a dedicated building located at the bottom of the second lift hill. The building is constructed of wood and still retains some of the theming which was in place in this area of the park prior to the construction of Icon. Shortly after departing the station, the train engages with the haul-up chain for the first time at the bottom of the first lift hill. This haul-up is relatively short and elevates the train to a level high enough to allow it to coast around a circular section of track which delivers the train to the bottom of the second lift hill. The train then re-engages with the same chain, which itself has been fed through a series of drive wheels and is now running in the opposite direction. This allows it to pull the train to the top of the second, much longer haul up. Once the chain has reached the top of the second lift hill, it returns back down the underside of the second lift hill until it reaches a certain point where it suddenly changes direction and drops down vertically inside a concealed casing at the back of the station, eventually returning to where it started its journey at the bottom of the first lift hill. The click-click-clicking sound that you hear as the train is pulled up the lift hill is a special device known as a dog on the underside of the train as it engages with what is known as the dog rack. This is part of the ride's anti-rollback mechanism, which runs parallel with the lift hill chain and prevents the train from rolling back down the lift hill if the chain was to break. To allow the maintenance team to be able to remove Big Dipper's lift hill motor for servicing or replacement, a large panel in the side of the building it is located in can be removed. A special overhead steel frame and lifting equipment are used to load the heavy motor onto a trolley and dedicated length of track, which are used to move it to the side of the Pleasure Beach Express Railway. From here, the motor is loaded onto a special carriage on the PBE train and transported around the park to the maintenance workshop. Although the braking system on the Big Dipper has been updated over the years to meet modern day safety standards and introduce a modern block section operation, in principle the same manual braking system is still in use today as when the ride was first built, and requires the ride operator to manually stop the train as it returns to the station. All except one of the brakes are operated manually by the operator in the brake box. The operator has 3 colour-coded handles which are mechanically linked to brake actuators. The brake that is not manually operated is called the check brake, and this is the first brake to be reached by a train as it approaches the station. The brake is controlled by a wooden handle next to the track, which is set and locked into position at the start of each day. Environmental conditions determine the actual braking strength that is selected each day, and this setting is then only adjusted if the speed of the trains reaching the station is deemed to be too high or too low. After being slowed by the check brake, the train reaches 2 separate sets of brakes under the control of the operator. The first of these is used to adjust the speed of the train as it approaches the station using the yellow handle, and then the second is used to bring the train to a complete stop using the blue handle. When the train is clear of passengers, the operator is able to release the brake, allowing the train to steadily roll forwards into the station. The station brake is made up of 2 separate brake units which are widely separated and are controlled by the white handle. Big Dipper used to have a mid-course brake run halfway around the ride, close to the Big Blue Hotel. However, this section of brake run is no longer present. The brake run and the brake operator's cabin were completely removed as more modern safety standards were implemented and an automated block section operating system added. To ensure that riders remain safely seated during the ride, all of the seats on Big Dipper's trains have lap bars fitted. These lap bars are locked into place using an electrically operated solenoid mechanism before the train is dispatched. When the train returns to the station at the end of the ride, the lap bars are released by the ride operator in the brake box using a 12-volt power supply, which is presented to the left-hand side of the train. The power supply is picked up by two spring-loaded electrical contacts, which make contact with two metal power strips that run along the edge of the station platform. Located at the side of the platform is a dispatch buzzer, which is used by the ride operators to inform one another when the train has been safely loaded and is ready for dispatch. One of the biggest innovations to be incorporated into Big Dipper's design was the introduction of John Miller's under-friction system, better known as upstop wheels, in which extra sets of wheels placed beneath the track hold the train securely onto the ride. Patented in 1912, these upstop wheels prevent the trains from lifting up off the track and are one of the key safety features that allowed roller coaster designs to become much more exciting, thrilling and intense, while still being safe to ride. William George Bean, one of the founders of Blackpool Pleasure Beach, acquired the UK rights to the system, and the Big Dipper became the first roller coaster in Europe to use them. The transfer track is a special section of track located within the station. It is used to allow the ride operator to add or remove trains to or from the ride. On busy days, the ride will operate a two-train operation, but on quieter days one train will be left stored on the transfer track. Positioned at the very top of the tower is a very iconic symbol which draws your attention to the ride and is a famous landmark at the Pleasure Beach. Here we look inside the base of the droplet, or should I say the onion, or the teardrop, the ice gem or cupola. No one actually seems to know what it's officially meant to be. In fact, even the operations and maintenance team at the Pleasure Beach are split into two different camps as to whether they think it's a droplet or an onion. Over the years, as the tower has changed, so too has the top of it. It's had a variety of domes, spheres and cones in the past. Whilst waiting in the station for your ride, you might wonder what the blanked off windows are for at the opposite side of the platform. They are in fact the windows that used to be part of Coaster's restaurant, where guests could sit and enjoy a meal while watching all of the activity going on in the station. During the winter when the park is closed, the trains are removed from the ride for maintenance. To enable the heavy trains to be transported to the maintenance workshops, they are lifted from the track using a purpose-built rig and specialist lifting equipment. The train's cars are individually loaded onto a special carriage on the Pleasure Beach Express train, which then transports them around the park to the maintenance workshop. It's also interesting to note that this section of track used to be part of a tunnel that led all the way up to the bottom of the main lift hill. From time to time, the Pleasure Beach run Walk the Woody events, where members of the public can take part in a supervised track walk of the Big Dipper. It's a great experience which I highly recommend you have a go at if you ever get the chance.
You also get to see the sand here that the park is built on, because we were originally built on the beach.
To ensure that the ride runs as smoothly as possible and the trains are able to complete the whole layout easily, the friction between the track and the trains needs to be reduced as much as possible. To achieve this, each morning the park's maintenance team applies a generous amount of lubricating grease to the curved section of track at the front of the station. This section of track, which leads into the tunnel at the start of the ride, progressively applies the grease to the wheels of each of the trains each time they leave the station, steadily transferring the grease around the whole track layout. This ensures that the level of friction is greatly reduced and the kinetic energy the trains have gained as they reach the top of the lift hill is efficiently released as the trains travel around the track. As early evening starts to draw in, the park takes on a completely different atmosphere and has an even more exciting feel to it. The Big Dipper feels somewhat mysterious and gives you an even greater expectation of thrill and adventure. As the train races around the track in the twilight of the evening, with only its distinctive latticework structure lit by the park's accent lighting, it really does feel like you are riding a very special, one-of-a-kind classic wooden roller coaster.